The early morning sun cast long shadows across Atlanta International Airport's Terminal A as Marcus Richardson adjusted his worn leather backpack. Today was different from his usual travel days. No tailored suit, no polished briefcase, and no entourage of assistants trailing behind him. Instead, he wore faded jeans, a plain black t-shirt, and comfortable sneakers. At 52 years old, Marcus had built Skyward Airlines from the ground up over the past 2 decades. What started as a small regional carrier had grown into one of the country's most successful airlines, though few people recognized him as its owner and CEO. His salt and pepper hair was hidden under a baseball cap, and his usual clean-shaven face now carried a few days' worth of stubble. The idea for this undercover assessment came to him during a board meeting last week. While reviewing customer satisfaction reports, Marcus noticed a disturbing pattern of complaints about discriminatory treatment. As an African-American business leader, he had faced his share of prejudice throughout his career, but he wanted to believe his own company was different. Time to see how things really work on the ground, Marcus muttered to himself as he joined the line at the premium check-in counter. He had deliberately booked his ticket under his middle name, James, to avoid any special treatment. His reservation was for a business-class seat on flight SA 347 to Chicago, a route he had personally inaugurated 5 years ago. Around him, the airport buzzed with its usual morning energy. Business travelers in pressed suits tapped away on their phones, families caroled excited children, and airline staff moved with practiced efficiency. Marcus observed everything with keen eyes, noting how the check-in staff interacted with different passengers. He watched as a white businessman in front of him was processed quickly and courteously, complete with suggestions for the airport lounge and priority security lane. The staff member's smile was warm and professional, exactly what Marcus expected from his employees. When it was his turn, Marcus stepped forward with his ID and booking confirmation ready. The check-in attendant, whose name tag read Patricia, barely glanced at him before her smile faltered slightly. Her eyes darted between his casual attire and the business class booking on her screen. "Good morning, sir," Patricia said, her tone notably different from how she had addressed the previous passenger. "There seems to be some confusion with your booking." Marcus raised an eyebrow but kept his expression neutral. "What seems to be the problem?" "Well," Patricia continued, drawing out the word, "I see you're booked in business class, but perhaps you'd be more comfortable in our economy section. The fare difference could be substantial." The implications in her tone were clear. She didn't believe he belonged in business class. Marcus had experienced this before, long before he owned an airline, but it still stung. He remained calm, remembering his purpose here today. "I'm quite comfortable with my business class booking, thank you," he replied evenly. "Is there a problem with my ticket?" Patricia's fingers clacked against her keyboard with unnecessary force. "Sir, business class tickets are quite expensive. Are you sure you haven't made a mistake in your booking?" Around them, other passengers began to take notice of the exchange. Marcus could feel their stares, some curious, others uncomfortable. He stood straight, maintaining his dignity despite the growing tension. "I'm very sure about my booking," Marcus stated firmly. "I travel business class frequently." "Do you have your frequent flyer card?" Patricia asked, her tone becoming increasingly condescending. "Or perhaps a corporate account number?" Marcus reached into his wallet and produced his platinum membership card. Patricia examined it with obvious skepticism, turning it over in her hands as if checking for counterfeiting. "I'll need to verify this with my supervisor," she announced, reaching for her phone. "These cards are very exclusive, and we need to ensure everything is in order." As Patricia made the call, Marcus glanced around the terminal. He noticed how other staff members were treating passengers differently based on their appearance. It was subtle, a warmer smile here, a more helpful attitude there, but it was unmistakably present. This was exactly why he had decided to conduct this undercover assessment. Sometimes, the view from the executive suite could be too sanitized, too distant from the real experiences of passengers. As Patricia spoke in hushed tones with her supervisor, Marcus knew this interaction was about to become a teaching moment, though not in the way his staff expected. Patricia's supervisor, a woman named Karen Wells, arrived at the check-in counter with quick, sharp steps. Her crisp uniform and perfectly styled blonde hair projected authority, but the slight frown on her face suggested she was already prepared to find fault. Is there a problem here? Karen asked, directing her question to Patricia while barely acknowledging Marcus's presence. This gentleman, Patricia emphasized the word with doubt, claims to have a business class booking and a platinum membership card. I thought it best to verify. Marcus watched as Karen took his ID and membership card, studying them with the same suspicion Patricia had shown. He noticed how her eyes lingered on his casual clothes, the way she pursed her lips when looking at his identification. Sir, where did you obtain this membership card? Karen asked, her tone carrying an edge of accusation. Through normal channels, Marcus replied calmly. I've been a member for quite some time. A small crowd of travelers had begun to gather nearby, pretending to check their phones while watching the scene unfold. Marcus could see some filming discreetly with their smartphones, while others whispered among themselves. Well, there seems to be a serious issue here, Karen announced, raising her voice slightly. These premium memberships are exclusively for our most valued customers. We take fraud very seriously at Skyward Airlines. Marcus felt his jaw tighten, but he maintained his composure. I assure you, there's no fraud involved. I'm simply trying to check in for my flight. Karen turned to Patricia. Call security. We need to verify this situation thoroughly. She then faced Marcus again, speaking as if to a child. Sir, if you'd like to avoid further complications, I suggest you accept a reassignment to economy class. We can sort out any misunderstandings. There. As Patricia reached for the phone, Marcus noticed Sarah Chen, his executive assistant, walking through the terminal. She was supposed to be on a different flight today, heading to New York for a series of meetings. The universe, it seemed, had impeccable timing. I don't think that will be necessary, Marcus said, his voice still steady, but carrying more weight now. Sir, we have protocols. Karen began, but Marcus cut her off with a raised hand. Sarah, he called out, catching his assistant's attention. Sarah Chen looked up from her tablet, her eyes widening as she recognized the situation. She hurried over, her heels clicking against the airport floor. Mr. Richardson, she exclaimed, then quickly caught herself. I mean, Mr. Richardson, CEO of Skyward Airlines. I wasn't expecting to see you here, sir. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Karen's face lost all color, while Patricia's hands froze over her keyboard. The onlookers who had been pretending not to watch suddenly stopped pretending. CEO, Patricia whispered, her voice barely audible. Yes, Sarah confirmed, unable to hide her disapproval of the situation. Marcus Richardson, founder and CEO of Skyward Airlines. Is there some problem with this check-in? Karen's professional demeanor crumbled entirely. Mr. Richardson, there must be some mistake. Oh, there definitely is a mistake. Marcus finally spoke, his voice carrying the authority he had been holding back. Several of them, in fact. But we'll address those shortly. The gathered crowd had grown larger, with several people openly recording now. Some were already typing on their phones, no doubt sharing the story on social media. Your business class seat is ready, sir, Patricia stammered, suddenly finding the ability to process his check-in with remarkable speed. Thank you, Marcus replied, accepting his boarding pass. He turned to Karen, who looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. Mrs. Wells, I'd like you and Patricia to join me in the airport office. We need to have a discussion about customer service standards at Skyward Airlines. As Sarah made a quick call to arrange the meeting, Marcus could hear the murmurs from the crowd. This incident would likely go viral within hours, but he was already thinking beyond the immediate drama. This would become a teaching moment, not just for Patricia and Karen, but for the entire airline industry. He had come looking for insights into his company's service standards, and he had certainly found them. Now it was time to turn this unfortunate incident into meaningful change. The airport office was quiet except for the soft hum of the air conditioning. Marcus sat at the head of the conference table, Sarah Chen beside him taking notes on her tablet. Across from them, Karen Wells and Patricia Thompson sat rigid in their chairs, their faces a mixture of fear and embarrassment. Let's review what happened out there, Marcus began, his voice calm but firm. He pulled out his phone and placed it on the table. My social media team tells me videos of the incident are already trending. #SkywardShame is gaining traction. Karen shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Mr. Richardson, Please allow me to apologize. We had no idea. That's exactly the problem, Marcus interrupted. You had no idea, so you made assumptions. Tell me, what made you question my ticket and membership card? Patricia stared at her hands folded in her lap. Your appearance, she admitted quietly. My appearance, Marcus repeated. You mean my jeans? My t-shirt? Or perhaps something else? The silence in the room was deafening. Both women knew exactly what he meant, but neither wanted to say it aloud. I built this airline from nothing, Marcus continued, leaning forward. 20 years ago, I started with 2 leased planes and a dream. Today, we have a fleet of 300 aircraft and routes to 47 countries. And yet, I can't check in for a flight on my own airline without being accused of fraud. Sarah's tablet chimed with another notification. Sir, the video has reached 1 million views. Major news networks are requesting statements. Outside the office window, planes took off and landed in a continuous rhythm. Marcus watched one of his aircraft, easily identifiable by its distinctive blue and silver livery, soar into the morning sky. Do you know why I was traveling incognito today? He asked, turning back to Karen and Patricia. Neither answered. I received reports about discriminatory treatment at our check-in counters. I wanted to see for myself if these complaints had merit. Clearly, they did. Karen's professional facade cracked. We'll accept any consequences, Mr. Richardson. If you want our resignations. Resignations? Marcus shook his head. That would be the easy way out. No, I have something else in mind. He stood and walked to the window, watching another skyward plane taxi toward the runway. In the next hour, our PR team will release a statement. We'll acknowledge what happened and announce new company-wide initiatives for diversity and inclusion training. Turning back to face them, he continued, You two will help develop and lead these training sessions. You'll share this experience, your experience, with every Skyward employee. Sometimes, the best teachers are those who have learned the hardest lessons. Patricia looked up for the first time since entering the office. You're not firing us. No, Marcus replied, but I am challenging you to be better. To help others be better. This isn't just about race. It's about treating every passenger with respect, regardless of how they look or what they wear. Sarah's tablet chimed again. CNN is live outside the terminal, she reported. They're requesting an interview. Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Schedule it for noon. This is an opportunity to address a bigger issue in the airline industry, in society itself. He turned back to Karen and Patricia. Until then, I want you both to write down everything you learned from this morning. Every assumption you made, every action you took, every thought that led to your decisions. Be honest. Be thorough. This will be the foundation of our new training program. Both women nodded, still processing that they were being given a chance to make amends rather than simply being dismissed. One more thing, Marcus added as he gathered his belongings. I'll be taking my original flight to Chicago in business class. You'll both work your regular shifts today. Show me and everyone else that you can do better. As Marcus left the office with Sarah, he could hear the buzz of media activity growing in the terminal. This wasn't how he had planned to spend his day, but sometimes the most important lessons came from unexpected moments. His phone buzzed with a message from the board of directors, requesting an emergency meeting. Marcus smiled slightly. Change was coming to Skyward Airlines, and it was long overdue. Outside, the morning sun had risen fully, casting no more shadows across the terminal. It was going to be an interesting day indeed. Marcus sat in front of the CNN cameras, his casual attire now a deliberate statement. The terminal's VIP lounge had been quickly converted into a makeshift interview studio, with Sarah Chen and Skyward's hastily assembled PR team standing off-camera. Mr. Richardson, began the interviewer, Lisa Chen, videos of this morning's incident have gone viral. Can you tell us what happened in your own words? Marcus adjusted his baseball cap, still refusing to change into the suit his PR team had brought. I experienced what many travelers face daily, prejudice based on appearance. The difference is, I own the airline. And you are conducting an undercover assessment? Lisa asked, leaning forward with interest. Yes, we've received complaints about discriminatory treatment. I needed to see firsthand if these concerns were valid. Marcus paused, choosing his next words carefully. Unfortunately, they were more than valid. Behind the cameras, Sarah showed him her tablet. The story had exploded across all social media platforms. Hashtag Skyward Shame had evolved into hashtag Skyward Change, with people sharing their own similar experiences across various airlines. Your response was unexpected, Lisa continued. Instead of firing the employees involved, you're making them part of the solution. Why? Marcus smiled slightly. Firing them would make headlines for a day. Teaching them, and through them others, creates lasting change. This isn't about punishment, it's about progress. The interview was interrupted by a commotion outside the lounge. The door burst open, and James Sterling, Skyward's board chairman, strode in with two other board members behind him. "Cut the cameras," Sterling demanded. When no one moved, he added more forcefully, "Now." Lisa signaled her crew to stop recording, though they kept their equipment ready. Sterling approached Marcus, his face flushed with anger. "What are you doing, Marcus?" he hissed. "Our stock is fluctuating wildly. Corporate partners are calling. This isn't how we handle these situations." Marcus stood slowly, removing his cap. "And how do we usually handle these situations, James? By quietly settling? By sweeping them under the rug? By following protocol?" Sterling's voice rose. "By letting PR handle it with a careful statement. Not by giving live interviews in jeans and a t-shirt." The room had gone completely silent. Even the camera crew stood frozen, sensing the tension between the airline's two most powerful figures. "Protocol," Marcus repeated softly. "That's part of the problem. We've been following protocol so long we've forgotten to follow our humanity." He turned to face the board members. "How many of you have ever flown incognito on our airlines? How many have experienced what our passengers really experience?" Sterling's face reddened further. This is about exactly that." Marcus cut him off. "This is about every passenger who's ever been profiled, every customer who's been made to feel less than worthy of our service. And yes, James, it's about me, a black man who built this airline but still gets questioned about belonging in business class." Sarah stepped forward, tablet in hand. "Sir, our social media engagement is up 300%. Customer responses are overwhelmingly positive. Major corporations are reaching out to partner with us on diversity initiatives." Sterling blinked, thrown off by this information. They are, Marcus confirmed, "because we're not hiding from this. We're not following the usual protocol of denial and deflection. We're facing it head-on and promising real change." He picked up his cap and put it back on. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a flight to catch. And yes, James, I'm flying in these clothes. Because the price of a ticket shouldn't depend on what someone is wearing or what they look like." As Marcus headed for the door, Sterling called after him. "The board will need to discuss this." "Good," Marcus replied without turning around. "It's about time we had that discussion. Schedule it for when I return from Chicago. And James?" He paused at the door. "Wear something casual. Let's see how you're treated at check-in." The CNN crew had begun packing up their equipment, but Lisa Chen caught up with Marcus. "Mr. Richardson, can we continue the interview?" Marcus checked his watch. "I have 15 minutes before my flight, but let's do it while walking to the gate. I want people to see their CEO going through security just like everyone else." As they moved through the terminal, passengers began to recognize him from the viral videos. Some took photos, others applauded. But Marcus kept walking, focused on making his flight and making his point. Change was coming to Skyward Airlines, whether the board was ready or not. Marcus made his way through security, deliberately choosing the regular line instead of the priority lane. The TSA agents, who had seen the viral videos on their phones during breaks, tried to usher him to the front, but he politely declined. "I'll wait like everyone else," he said, earning appreciative nods from other passengers in line. The CNN crew, still following at a respectful distance, captured this moment. Lisa Chen continued her interview between security checkpoints. "Even now, you're refusing special treatment," she observed. "Leadership isn't about privileges," Marcus replied, removing his shoes for screening. "It's about understanding every aspect of your customer's experience." As he reached his gate, he found an unexpected scene. The flight crew had assembled, led by Captain Maria Rodriguez, a veteran pilot who had been with Skyward since its early days. "Mr. Richardson," she said, stepping forward. The crew would like to say something. The gate area was packed with passengers, many holding up phones to record. Captain Rodriguez turned to address both Marcus and the gathered crowd. 15 years ago, I applied to be a pilot at several airlines. Most rejected me because they weren't ready for a Hispanic female captain. But Skyward, you, Mr. Richardson, gave me a chance. She paused, composing herself. Today, we have the most diverse flight crew in the industry, and it's because you saw beyond appearances. Marcus was moved by her words, but before he could respond, an elderly passenger stood up from his seat near the gate. "May I speak?" the man asked, his voice carrying years of authority. He introduced himself as Dr. William Chen, a retired professor of social economics. "I've been watching everything unfold this morning, and I must say, this is the first time I've seen a CEO tackle discrimination by experiencing it firsthand." The gate area had grown completely quiet. Even the usual airport announcements seemed muted. "For years," Dr. Chen continued, "I've studied how companies handle diversity issues. Usually, it's all corporate speeches and mandatory training videos. But you, sir, you put yourself in the shoes of those who face these challenges daily." Sarah, who had been managing the growing media presence, approached Marcus with an urgent update. "Sir, the board has called an emergency meeting for tomorrow. But there's something else. Our customer service lines are flooded with people sharing their stories, and booking requests have increased by 200% in the last hour." Marcus nodded, taking in this information. He turned to address the gathered crowd, aware that his words would likely be shared far beyond this gate. "What happened this morning was unfortunate, but not unique. It happens every day, at every airport, to people who don't own airlines." He gestured to the diverse crowd around him. "Each of you has probably experienced or witnessed something similar. Today, we start changing that, not just at Skyward, but hopefully across the industry." Captain Rodriguez stepped forward again. "Sir, it's time for boarding. Would you like to board first?" Marcus shook his head. "No, let's board according to our usual procedure. But I do have one request." He turned to the gate agents, including one who had been nervously watching the proceedings. "Call the boarding groups exactly as written on the tickets. No assumptions, no judgments." As the boarding process began, Marcus waited with Group 3, his business class ticket notwithstanding. Passengers who passed him offered words of support, some sharing quick stories of their own experiences. Lisa Chen, still recording, asked one final question. "What happens tomorrow, Mr. Richardson?" Marcus watched as a young black girl in a princess dress was welcomed aboard with her family, the gate agent bending down to admire her crown. "Tomorrow, we start rebuilding. Not just policies and procedures, but mindsets. And we'll do it together. Board members, executives, frontline staff, and most importantly, our passengers." As he finally boarded the aircraft, taking his seat in business class, Marcus noticed something remarkable. The usual invisible barriers between cabins seemed less rigid. Flight attendants greeted everyone with the same genuine warmth. Passengers helped each other with bags regardless of their seating assignments. Small changes, perhaps, but significant ones. As the plane pushed back from the gate, Marcus knew that this flight was more than just a trip to Chicago. It was the first step in a much longer journey, one that would transform not just Skyward Airlines, but perhaps the entire industry's approach to equality and respect. The Chicago skyline came into view as Flight SA 347 began its descent. Throughout the 3-hour flight, Marcus had observed every interaction between crew and passengers, making notes on his tablet. What he saw gave him hope. The news of the morning's events had already sparked visible changes in how people treated each other. As the plane taxied to the gate at O'Hare International Airport, Marcus's phone lit up with notifications. Sarah had sent him a detailed report of what had transpired since takeoff. The story had gone international. News outlets from London to Tokyo were covering it. #Skyward Change had become the top trending topic worldwide. But what caught his attention was an email from Karen Wells, the supervisor from the morning's incident. "Mr. Richardson," it read, "I've spent the last few hours reflecting on my actions. My behavior was inexcusable. I've already drafted some initial thoughts for the training program, including my personal experience of realizing my own biases. If you're still willing to let me be part of the solution, I promise to work tirelessly to make things right." As passengers began to deplane, something unexpected happened. A flight attendant, Maria Torres, asked for everyone's attention. "Before we disembark," she announced, her voice slightly shaky but determined, "I want to share something. For years, I've watched passengers being treated differently based on how they look or dress. I've been guilty of it myself. Today's events have opened my eyes, and I want to apologize to anyone I may have judged unfairly." The cabin fell silent. Then, a businessman in first class stood up. "I need to apologize too," he said. "I've complained when people I thought didn't belong were upgraded to first class. I was wrong." One by one, passengers and crew members began sharing their own stories and realizations. The plane had become an impromptu confession booth, a place of honest reflection and acknowledgement. Marcus remained in his seat, listening to each person. This was more than he had expected. It was genuine change happening in real time. His phone buzzed again. The board meeting had been moved up. They wanted to meet as soon as he landed. But there was also a message from an unexpected source, the CEO of United Airlines. "Marcus," the message read, "what you did today wasn't just brave, it was necessary. We need to talk about implementing similar changes across all airlines. This isn't about competition anymore. It's about doing what's right." As Marcus finally stood to leave the aircraft, Captain Rodriguez was waiting at the door. "Sir," she said, "every pilot in our fleet has requested to be part of the new training program. We want to learn, to do better." Outside the plane, a crowd had gathered at the gate. Airport staff, passengers from other flights, and local media all waited to catch a glimpse of the CEO who had chosen to experience discrimination firsthand. Marcus noticed Patricia, the check-in agent from Atlanta, was calling. He answered, putting it on speaker. "Mr. Richardson," her voice cracked with emotion, "I've been doing check-ins for 12 years. Today was the first time I truly saw how my biases affect people. I've spent the last few hours talking to passengers, really listening to their stories. We've started a support group for airline staff who want to change. Can we make this part of the training program?" "Of course," Marcus replied, moved by her transformation. "That's exactly what we need." Sarah met him at the gate with updates. Major corporations were reaching out, not just with support, but with pledges to examine their own practices. Airlines worldwide were announcing reviews of their service policies. The story had become a catalyst for change across the entire service industry. As they walked through O'Hare, Marcus noticed something different. Staff at every counter, every shop, every restaurant seemed more conscious of how they treated people. News traveled fast in airports, and today's lesson was spreading faster than any flight. "The board is waiting," Sarah reminded him gently. Marcus straightened his still casual clothes. "Good, because what happened in Atlanta was just the beginning. We're not just changing an airline, we're changing an industry's culture." As they headed toward the executive offices, Marcus could feel the eyes of hundreds of travelers on him. But now, they weren't staring because of his clothes or his appearance. They were watching a man who had turned a moment of discrimination into a movement for change. The real work was just beginning, but for the first time in aviation history, an airline wasn't just promising to do better. It was showing how to be better. The Chicago boardroom was tense as Marcus faced the 12 members of Skyward Airlines' board of directors. The wall-mounted screens displayed real-time social media feeds, news coverage, and the company's stock performance, which had been fluctuating wildly throughout the day. James Sterling, the board chairman, sat at the opposite end of the table, his earlier anger now replaced with a thoughtful expression. He had changed into jeans and a polo shirt, a silent acknowledgement of Marcus's point about appearance-based discrimination. "Our shareholders are concerned," one board member began, but Marcus raised his hand. "Before we discuss shareholders," he said, "I want you to see something." He nodded to Sarah, who dimmed the lights and started playing the video compilation on the main screen. The video showed hundreds of passenger testimonials that had been flooding in throughout the day. People of all backgrounds sharing their experiences of discrimination while traveling. Some were crying, others angry, but all were grateful that someone had finally acknowledged their experiences. "These are our real shareholders," Marcus said quietly. "Every person who chooses to fly with us, who trusts us with their dignity as well as their safety." The boardroom remained silent as the videos played. When the lights came back up, several board members were wiping their eyes. "What do you propose?" Sterling asked. his voice softer than before. Marcus stood and walked to the window, looking out at the planes taking off and landing. A complete overhaul of our company culture. Not just training sessions, but a fundamental change in how we view and treat every passenger. He turned back to the board. Karen Wells and Patricia Thompson, the employees from this morning's incident, have already started developing a program. They're working with our flight crews, gate agents, and ground staff to identify where bias affects our service. And the costs? Another board member asked. Sarah stepped forward with a tablet. Actually, sir, our advance bookings have increased by 300% since this morning. Major corporations are requesting partnerships. We've received offers from diversity consultants willing to work pro bono. The positive publicity alone is worth millions in advertising. Marcus continued, but this isn't about profit. It's about setting an industry standard. Other airlines are watching. We have the chance to lead real change. A senior board member, Dr. Janet Chen, who had been quiet until now, spoke up. My daughter was once denied entry to a first-class lounge despite having a valid ticket. The staff didn't believe she could afford it. She paused. I vote we fully support this initiative. One by one, the board members began to share their own stories or stories of their family members facing similar discrimination. The boardroom had transformed from a place of corporate decision-making to a space for honest dialogue. We need to document all of this, Marcus said. Every story, every experience. It becomes part of our training, part of our company's DNA. Sterling, who had been listening intently, finally stood. I owe you an apology, Marcus. I was worried about stock prices when I should have been worried about human dignity. You have my full support. The board voted unanimously to approve a comprehensive new program. Skyward Standards, Beyond First-Class Service for All. It would include mandatory sensitivity training, regular undercover assessments, and a new customer feedback system designed to catch and address discrimination immediately. As the meeting concluded, Marcus received a message from Captain Rodriguez. The crew from the morning's flight had organized an impromptu workshop at the Atlanta hub, sharing their experiences and brainstorming ways to eliminate bias in customer service. This is just the beginning, Marcus told the board. Every difficulty, every uncomfortable moment, every honest conversation, it's all part of real change. Sarah showed him her tablet one last time. The stock had stabilized and was now trending upward. More importantly, #Skyward Change had evolved into a movement, with people sharing stories of positive changes they witnessed in airports across the country. As Marcus left the boardroom, he saw a young black girl in the hallway, probably around 12 years old, wearing a pilot's cap. She was part of a school group touring the corporate offices. Mr. Richardson. She called out shyly, I saw what happened on TV. I want to be a pilot, and now I know I can be one. Marcus knelt down to her level. Yes, you can. And by the time you're ready to fly, things will be even better. That moment, more than any board meeting or media coverage, showed him the true impact of the day's events. Change wasn't just about policies and procedures. It was about creating a future where no one would be judged by their appearance, only by their character and capabilities. 6 months had passed since the incident at Atlanta International Airport. Marcus Richardson stood at the podium in Skyward Airline's main training center, addressing the latest graduation class of customer service representatives. The room looked different now. Photos lined the walls, hundreds of them, showing diverse passengers and crew members sharing their stories. The infamous viral video from that morning in Atlanta played on a loop in the lobby, not as a source of shame, but as a reminder of how far they'd come. 6 months ago, Marcus began, we faced a moment that could have broken us. Instead, it transformed us. Our numbers tell a story, Marcus continued, gesturing to the screen behind him. Customer satisfaction up 85%. Employee retention improved by 60%. But the real success isn't in these statistics, it's in the stories we hear every day. Sarah Chen, now promoted to Chief of Customer Experience, stepped forward with the latest reports. Every Skyward flight now included anonymous feedback surveys, specifically tracking instances of discrimination or exceptional service. Last month, she announced, we recorded 0 discrimination complaints for the first time in our airline's history. The audience applauded, but Marcus raised his hand for quiet. That's not enough. Zero complaints doesn't mean zero bias. It means we must work harder to recognize and address our unconscious prejudices. The training center's doors opened as a special group entered. The young girl Marcus had met in Chicago, now part of Skyward's junior aviator program, along with 50 other children from diverse backgrounds. They wore miniature pilot uniforms, their faces bright with possibility. "This is why we do what we do," Marcus said, pointing to the children. "Not just for today's passengers, but for tomorrow's aviation leaders." Captain Rodriguez, recently promoted to Chief of Flight Operations, joined him at the podium. "Every Skyward employee now goes through what we call the experience, traveling incognito on our flights, checking in with different appearances and personas. It's changed how we see our passengers and ourselves." The graduation ceremony continued with each new employee receiving not just a certificate, but a commitment card. On it was printed the story from Atlanta, along with the pledge. "Every passenger is a CEO until proven otherwise, and even then, treat them like one." After the ceremony, Marcus walked through the terminal of O'Hare International Airport. The changes were subtle but significant. Check-in counters had no priority lines. Everyone was treated as priority. Gate agents greeted each passenger with the same respect, regardless of their ticket class or appearance. His phone buzzed with a message from James Sterling. The board chairman had become one of the strongest advocates for change, even starting an industry-wide initiative called Aviation for All. "Marcus," the message read, "the International Air Transport Association wants us to present our program at their annual conference. We're setting the new global standard." As he reached his gate for a flight back to Atlanta, Marcus saw a familiar scene, a passenger being questioned about their business class ticket. But this time was different. The gate agent was explaining the features of business class to everyone in line, regardless of their appearance or dress, ensuring every passenger felt equally valued. Sarah joined him at the gate with final updates. Other airlines had begun adopting Skyward's training program. Tourism boards were promoting destinations using #SkywardChange as a mark of inclusive travel. The morning's incident in Atlanta had sparked a revolution in customer service across the entire travel industry. "Sir," she said, handing him his boarding pass, "they want to name the new training center after you." Marcus shook his head. "Name it the Change Center, because that's what it's really about, the willingness to change, to grow, to do better." As he boarded his flight, Marcus noticed something that brought a smile to his face. Karen Wells was working the flight as part of her monthly Back to Basics rotation, a new program where managers worked alongside frontline staff to stay connected with passenger experiences. She greeted every passenger with genuine warmth, her transformation complete. The incident that could have ended her career had instead given her, and Skyward Airlines, a new purpose. As the plane took off, Marcus looked out at the sunset. The airline industry was changing, one flight at a time, one person at a time, and it had all started with a CEO in jeans and a t-shirt, reminded of what it felt like to be judged by appearance alone. The real achievement wasn't in avoiding discrimination. It was in creating a culture where every person, regardless of how they looked, felt valued, respected, and welcome in the skies.